an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Raybearer, chapters 22, 23, 24, and 25, essentially the remainder of part 3. In this section, we find out that the lady is lying to the people who are her anointed, which I was saying I wasn't sure if that was possible. We've got multiple instances, and yet I'm still surprised that that is possible. And wow, what a fucking shitty move. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode and for being flexible. I had to cancel last week. I had something done that made it hard to talk. My voice may sound kind of weird this week because I am still having a little bit of trouble with talking, and part of that is also due to the facial twitch. But I really appreciate everybody being so flexible on me having to reschedule everything. So, first thing first, I need to mention off the top, there is only one more episode booked to cover this book, but there are over 100 pages left in the book. I don't know if you saw this, Ashleigh, and I'm wondering if you perhaps based the episode count on the Kindle book, which we're looking at it, realizing isn't actually accurate to the real number of pages. But this means that I'm going to have to cover quite a lot for the next episode. And I feel a little bit bad about it because I think that this book really deserves more time. It just deserves a lot more space to talk about all of the themes, and I'm sure that this last section is going to be a doozy, but I just don't have anywhere in my schedule to fit another episode, so I just feel bad about it, because if I had been keeping better track from the start about how I was breaking things up, I would have been able to prevent this, but I also would have really crammed a lot into each episode also. So yeah, it is what it is. This happens sometimes, but I just feel sad about it. Ashleigh says, when I realized how much is left, I got concerned. I'd be happy to commission another episode, but I don't think that'd be possible. If you wanted to wait, it would be possible, but it would be months from now that I would get to finish. And, there's just nowhere to fit it coming up. So that's the main thing. And I don't think that you want to wait months for just the one last episode. If there was enough of the book to make another 2, at least, I feel like that would make sense. But, so I just want everybody to be prepared for this last episode coming up, which I'll be recording tomorrow, actually, because of the way this all worked out, to be really, really packed. And forgive me if I'm not able to talk about some things that you really wanted me to cover, because I'm just not going to be able to give everything the time. But I'll do my best, and that's all we can do. So this section, is really kind of cementing some things for me. We find out, to cut to the chase here, that indeed the lady is the mango tree, right? And I am going to guess that Mbali is the one girl that almost went with her and decided, no, I need to do what's right for Aritsar, but didn't, because Mbali is the only one that seems to carry her message forward and be willing to confront the Emperor with his past, with that story that she tells. And it turns out that the lady was the Emperor's sister, little sister. And as usual, we find out that the idea only men can do XYZ is complete horseshit. It turns out that probably lots of women have had the Ray, but they have been quashed. And there was one time where a woman was allowed, and it is made to sound as if she inherited this Ray after her brother died. Like it was only given to her, this gift, because he was no longer alive and it moved on to the next, like, I guess, living heir. But once she stops to, like, ask the question, Tarasai realizes that they don't have any real evidence that she didn't already have the Ray to begin with. That's the story they've been told. And that sounds right to me. Like, this is the thing that I think when you begin to get older, it can go like one of two ways. And this is what I get really annoyed about. I was talking about this with Miles when we were covering Mistborn. We just started Alloy of Law. And we were talking about like conspiracy theories. And I can't remember if this was on air or off, but the people who subscribe to conspiracy theories, especially today, are just like they're on the right track with like not wanting to trust the system, in quotes, but they are so misguided as to what the system actually is. So their feelings of like being betrayed and being lied to, it's like, that isn't nothing. That is grounded in some reality. We are fed the kind of history that is so curated that it barely counts as history anymore. It's mostly lies. And the part that isn't lies is like shined up to such a degree that it's practically unrecognizable. And so as you get older and you begin to realize how much of this was absolute horseshit, it can be really scary because you're like, oh my God, they just straight up lied. Like my whole life, I've been just fed garbage. And I like believed it because what else was I supposed to do? And it's so disorienting. And there is a really natural response to getting that kind of information that not only undermines what you took for granted to be the truth, but also undermines the trust that you had in everybody who told you this story originally. And that is the part that I think, like, I sympathize with a lot of the conspiracy theorists out there, except that they're like directed in so the wrong place. And I really felt for Tarasai. It takes her so long to like come around to the fact that she has the Ray, that she is, that this is like something that her council mates have seen in her, and that her mother is related to the Emperor and that he would do this to her. And in some ways, it's almost sweet how Tarasai doesn't want to believe it because, and this is the kind of thing that every parent like wants it to be better for their child, right? Tarasai has not encountered the kind of attitude the Emperor had with his little sister, with Dio. Dio has been so receptive, you know, like that meeting where she can see through the reason why I think it's the Dermish are not scoring as well on certain tests, and she knows what it is. And he can see that she has come to a different conclusion, but she's not up there making her judgments, so she can't contribute. And later, Dio is asking her to contribute because he can see that she would be good at it and is open to that. And that is the thing that makes me so optimistic about what could happen for her. If Dio was like his father, this would be a whole other situation. But he is so willing to admit that he doesn't know it all, and he is not threatened by her. And I am so hopeful that this means that he is going to be able to actually set aside the kind of fear and paranoia that his father has. Because that clearly is still there. we see at the end of this section, right before the start of part 4, Tarasai is being told that she's going to have to rule to execute her own mother. And when they talk about why the emperor let her be part of the council, I think it's Sanjeet. It might be, I'll have to go back and look, but I think it's Sanjeet who says, or perhaps it's Kathleen, that for the emperor, just killing her would be tacit admission that she might have the ray, that the potential was even there. But if he lets her continue to thrive as a counselor, and she continues being subservient, that will be a kind of validation of everything that he was asserting to begin with. And what kills me is that it's not even a theory that she might have the ray. And I'm talking about with the lady. The story, if Meilu's story is to be believed, and I think it is that she actively had been connecting with other children in front of her brother and able to talk to them mentally, and he saw it. So it's not just that he's unwilling to consider that a woman might have the ray as a theoretical possibility. It is he is denying what he is looking at with his own eyes. And the first would be bad enough, but the second is truly despicable and insulting. And just so many things. And yet, with all of this, what I really appreciated was Meilu talking about how over time, the lady's anger over this situation changed her. And that she has become, as he puts it, her heart became calcified. That feels fair. Because, and again, this author is just so excellent. I just can't. She has Tarasai specifically mention that she doesn't use the word rape, but that's what's being said, that she raped Meilu. How good a person could she be? And that's part of what Tarasai is struggling with is I thought that the ray only came to good people. And they're like, no, the ray comes to people who can rule. That's not the same thing. Which, it's an unfortunate fact that they aren't the same thing. We really want to believe that they are. But the thing is, no person is simply good or bad. They grow into whomever over time based on the decisions that they make and what they're told and what they learn. And there's no real way to determine that from a child, where somebody's going to wind up as an adult and as an actual ruler. So it makes sense that the ray wouldn't really work that way, because while it is a kind of magic, it's not that kind of magic. It's not a personality test. It's an anointing of it, from the gods. It's a much more when we talk about being God's chosen in terms of the monarchy, which is how we used to think of it. This is a very literal interpretation of that. The ray makes it seem there is a God somewhere, looking down and going, that one, and tapping somebody. So you want to think that Am wouldn't grant this to somebody who didn't deserve it. But Am, if we are to be believed, is the idea of, has the same concept of free will as a lot of the gods in our universe. And Am doesn't tap somebody and then be and now you have to always be a good person because the ray compels you to be. Am taps somebody and gives them the gift, and then it is up to them how they decide to live and what they are going to do with their power. So, it's there's just so much about this revelation that makes Tarasai really struggle, because she had so many preconceived notions that I think she didn't even really realize were there. And that is how that shit works. It's the shock of finding out that things aren't what you thought is already tough. But then when you step back and look at all the things that you assumed, and a lot of those assumptions stemmed from the incorrect information you were given, that can be truly startling. And it makes you question so many other things as well. It makes you wonder, well, how many things have I just been sort of assuming they work like this, and they definitely don't, and I've been wrong this entire time. And that's part of getting older. That's part of growing up and becoming wiser, is beginning to realize how you can't depend on being fed the information. You have to use your observation and your critical thinking to determine the situation. But it takes a while to be able to cross over into doing that, because a lot of people just go their whole lives being fed information and believing it, and that's all they do. And they may develop some sort of cynicism, but that isn't really the same as critical thinking. So this is part of my thing with the conspiracy theory that the government is behind COVID. The government is capitalist, and they would want their workforce strong. They would want us at work. This is not the government. This does not play into an agenda that they would have at all, in my opinion. So it just doesn't, if you use critical thinking, not trusting the government, yeah, you shouldn't. That makes sense. But thinking that they would do something like this doesn't make any sense, because that's not aligned with the whole, But if you think that people can be injected with microchips in a vaccine, I guess that you will believe anything. So whatever. So anyway, I knew that a lot of this was coming. It's not I'm not sure. This is so hard, because you guys know that because of what I do with reading and watching things for a living now, I see a lot of twists coming, and it can be hard for me to tell if an author intended it to be a complete surprise, or if an author was expecting us to put the pieces together ourselves. And for example, there was a reveal in Mistborn during a live read, which I had figured out several episodes earlier, and everybody was really irritated. And I genuinely didn't even think that it was supposed to be a reveal, because it seemed so obvious to me. And part of that is because of the way that I consume the content. Because it's slowed down and I take my time and talk about things, it's easier for me to make connections. And also, I have done this so much that I can see some of the tropes at work and whatever, But I do want to say that for me, that does not impact my enjoyment of this story at all. Knowing this doesn't change anything about how I interpreted the story. And I am still really into seeing Tarasai's response to this, because this is her life, and her kind of digging in and not wanting to believe it, while understandably frustrating to those around her, feels real to me. So I'm going to back up, as I do, and we're going to talk about the meeting of Melu. And this is interesting. She sees him, but she thinks that he's going to be bright and blazing and floating above the ground with this sort of strong energy and aura to him. And instead, it says, a dark, narrow form rested on its side by the pool. It did not move as we approached. Blue wings lay dormant in the dust, smoldering like a waning fire. And she's like, oh my God, are you dead? And he's like, I wish I was dead. No, that's not what's happening here. And essentially, he's like, if I could be released from this bullshit and you would just kill that kid, we would be done with this. But instead, I have to fucking sit here and slowly waste away and not ever actually waste away. And I was like, this is brutal. I'm very relieved, because I thought that maybe seeing him suffering would make Tarasai sort of reconsider and wonder if it was like fair of her to put him through this just like because she doesn't want to carry out the wish. But instead, Tarasai is like, you know what? You're like a hugely powerful being, and you're just acting like there's no other option but to carry on doing the thing that we were told to do by a stupid mortal. I don't buy it. That doesn't feel right to me. And I was really delighted that that was the tone she took with him, and he seems genuinely moved by it. Like there's this spark to him after this of being proud of her, actually. And he tells her because Sanjeet is about to like come between her and Melu because it looks like Melu might attack her. And Melu says, "Put away your sword, Derma boy. My daughter has nothing to fear from me. You were well named. Behold what is coming." And she asks, how do I break her hold on me? And he says, only one thing is more powerful than a wish, and that is a purpose. Every creature has a purpose, a place in a grand story, a tale as old and pure as life and stronger than any mortal's wish. To diverge from the path your mother has set, you must find your place in that grand story, otherwise she will decide your place for you. That is all I know. Killing the Kunlea boy was a simpler solution, and that is why I urged you to do it. But I see now that your fate will never be simple. And if you are ever to find your purpose, then you must know who you really are. And you must know who the lady is. So this is when he tells her the story. And he's able to show her a lot of the story in the pool. So, yeah, this whole story is just about what you would expect. Olugbade has a little sister, and he is himself an intelligent and thoughtful boy, but he has a fear of intimacy. And it says, with inferiors, he was kind and generous, but with equals, he was closed and paranoid. He required constant proof of their love and loyalty, recoiling at the slightest hint of criticism. Honestly, same. Let me be straight. Same. I'm not going to lie. I have grown better and feel like I have expanded in this sense, but it took a minute. And yeah, that's not the best, but I definitely saw myself in this for a minute, and I was like, oh shit. All but the most patient children found him exhausting. I love this. He's not made to be a monster. He's not made to be somebody who's cruel for the fun of it or power hungry even. It's this like weird, like sad, empty well inside him that needs filling and just won't be. Because it can't be, because that's like a you thing, you know? It doesn't have anything to do with the people around you as much as it feels like it does. The lady understood him better than anyone and would have loved him if he had let her. But for reasons that he could not put into words, her effortless charisma filled him with rage. And so as time goes on, everything shifts because she is so talented, so intelligent, so gifted with speaking and making judgments. And he just doesn't have the same gift that she does in this respect. And he sees that. The only thing worse than somebody who's been given a job and isn't good at it, but they don't realize they're not good at it, is somebody who's been given a job and isn't good at it and they are aware that they are not good at it. One of two things can happen. Either they react like Dio and they're like, I'm not great at this. I need help. Somebody else who knows more can step in and handle parts of this. Or they have the reaction that Olugbade has, which is, I resent anyone who is good at the things I am not. Again, I would like to raise my hand and say, same. However, as I have gotten older, I have really begun to appreciate how much I don't want to be good at everything. I have been good at many things that I have tried, And I feel very blessed in that respect. I have like a competence to me. However, I don't need to be good. Like, what, it's not all about me. And that's part of learning that you're just not the center of the universe, which I can imagine is a harder thing to learn when you're a fucking emperor. And also, if you are afraid of letting people close, you want control constantly because that makes you feel like safer. So I just really, really understand him in this. And that's what makes it so painful is that like his reaction to her, if he had decided to like handle it differently, it could have been tremendous. They're pairing up because it doesn't seem like he was completely incompetent. He seems like more of a late bloomer and somebody who had to like grow into himself more. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you are spiteful to other people who aren't the same way and you feel threatened, it's not a good look. And so it comes down to her showing him the fact that she has the ray, and she tries to say that we could rule together, and he basically like flips out and says that this is treason. And he tells her that she needs to leave by the next morning with her traitor friends. And she genuinely doesn't get it. And there is nothing quite like thinking that being good and exceptional at something is going to make someone happy and then realizing that they are resentful of you. It's not a great moment. I had this happen with a close friend in high school, who just like basically blurted out that she kind of low-key hated me. And I thought she was like my best friend. And a lot of it was due to me like winning things or, getting parts she wanted in plays and things like this. And it was just tough because I wound up leaving that school for my senior year. And she was given an opportunity to kind of blossom without me overshadowing her, which is like literally what one of the teachers told me when I came back to visit was like, I think she did much better without you here, which I was like, why would you say that to me? And yet she still didn't like win the thing. She still didn't get the parts in the play. And I wonder what it was like for her to kind of blame me. And then I'm taken out of the equation and she still isn't doing the things that she thought she would easily do if I weren't in her way. And it's just like, I don't know. This moment of her being so exceptional and then literally being punished for it is so painful. And I understand both of them in this moment. I don't mean to justify him because he's inexcusably childish and cruel and short-sighted and selfish and prideful. Like, he's not putting the realm at the fucking, like, at the top of his priorities list. This is all about him. But I understand with the struggles that he's got with opening up to people, how this would be really like triggering to him, especially if he's already feeling a little bit inadequate. So, oh, right. It says that she says, come with me in Bali. I didn't even realize Bali was named. I just like thought I was putting that together. I'm not that smart. So, and in Bali, like, mind speaks to her, or no, she mouths at her, I believe you. Like, just lets her know, I'm not staying because I don't think you are the one. I am staying because I don't think it would be good for the realm, and I want to work for the realm, which is admirable in its way. And honestly, long term seems to have been the right call because the lady doesn't wind up like turning into a good person. And this is what's so, this is what I find really compelling here, is that the author has chosen to have somebody with a very legitimate grievance who has been genuinely oppressed and punished, who is as gifted, if not more so, than the person who's actually in power. And yet they are not the answer. They are not the good guy. And their situation is like deplorable. And you completely see how they wound up where they are today. But they have become, in many ways, what they were trying to fight against. And Lord help me, but is that not the fucking way? I really I hate this. I hate that this is how it happens so often. But what is it with us attempting to not be something, becoming inevitably what turns us into that thing? I genuinely, it's like it never fails. We always somehow play right into what we are afraid of. And I think that's part of our life's lessons. That part of that is learning what we are afraid of and learning to spot the fact that, yeah, we're doing the very thing we're allegedly trying to avoid. But, oh God, it's so rude. It's so mean-spirited too. It feels like fate so much of the time. And I wonder if the lady were to step back and look at her life with a more objective view, which I don't think she's capable of doing at this point. I mean, most of us aren't really capable of being objective about our own lives. But would she ever reach a point where she could see that she was becoming a monster, essentially? Lying to people and getting their hopes up about something in order to get access to an army, as we find out she has been doing with Wuen. Oh, yikes. So after this story is told, Sanjeet starts cracking up and says, "Oh my God, I was right." And Tarasai is like, "What?" And he says, "You glow like Dio. The heat that draws people and makes them want to trust him and follow him. I felt that with you the first day that I met you." And it's this is what the heat has been all these different times where she has been experiencing a really strong emotion. And she knows that she has this heat. We, as readers, I think, have been mostly assigning that to her mother and her connection to her mother and that sort of enchantment and the Eru in her. And it turns out, no, that's the Ray, as well as the fact that she is immune to fire. She thought that was being Eru or that the lady was protecting her. And Melu is like, Eru, that's he says the Alagbato blood provided your ability to see memories. The rest of you is human. And again, she continues to argue here about how, Ayatoro was an exception. There can only be one per generation. And I think Sanjeet says why. And she's just like, because, and realizes she doesn't actually have an answer. That is the thing that I think makes people the most scared, is if you just ask why, they realize that there's no substance to any answer they may give you. I had this moment with somebody online recently where they were accusing men who wear makeup of being feminine. And I was like, okay, why is that feminine? Why is wearing makeup feminine? And all they could say is, because women wear it. And I was like, women wear clothes. Is men wearing clothes feminine? We just have these ideas that are based societally in an expectation. But if you probe them at all, they completely fall apart. And it's just, being asked why. It's a simple thing. And this is why fucking therapists do it all the time. They'll challenge you on an assumption you're making and just push you a tiny bit and ask why. And all of a sudden you're like, I'm just literally making this all up. And that's a frightening thing to see about the way that you function, And when they're talking about how would it work with two rulers? Both Sanjeet and Melu are like, you'd rule together and your council would help you decide things if you disagreed. Like, it's really not that complicated. And Eru is like, I don't get y'all humans. Like, this isn't like a challenge to figure out. But y'all are really out here overcomplicating the simplest shit for like no reason. So he says, let's see. Then we can prove it, says Sanjeet. We can prove Tarasai is a Raybearer if we present the masks to the priests. They'll have to admit it. They were, let's see, should a mortal, I'm trying to find the spot where he talks about the mask. Okay. You've seen the mask of the emperor and the mask of your prince. They were forged by by Warlord Fire himself. And I'm like, is that a god or it's a capitalized. So I feel like that's a title. And the story of their creation is etched in the crypts of An Ilioba. Should a mortal translate those ancient words, she would see Warlord Fire create not 2 masks, but 4. 4 Raybearers, Emperor and Empress, Prince and Princess. And the other 2 masks have been lost. Ayatoro was the last to see them. Which is really interesting because that means that Ayatoro, she had both the like Empress and Princess mask, which implies that there was another princess who was a Raybearer also. And who knows what happened to her? Like, you know, all of these, there is evidence. And this, I really love the fact that this means far back enough in the history, there were co-rulers and it's been undone. It's like we think of history as being very linear, that we just continue to make progress as we go forward. And it's just not like that. We will make some progress and then undo it. And I'm trying to remember, there was an article I saw recently that detailed the first election of a black congressman or a senator. And basically it happened in like 1895, like it was early on enough that it would shock most of us who think that we have a pretty good handle on how history progressed in the United States. And of course, they were beset by white supremacists, and there was a huge push on figuring out how to oppress voters and how to drum up reasons to get him kicked out of office. It was, we started to move forward and then everybody flipped shit because they're cowards and we backed up several paces. And it's just, we're like that, man. We have to we get the idea for doing something progressive, but we have to grow into it and go through a lot of pain to get there. It's not without cost and it's not effortless. It's not without a fight, you know? I think a lot of people are tempted to sort of lay back and be like, oh, I don't really have to do anything because historically we've always progressed forward. And so inevitably, as years pass, we will continue to progress whether or not anyone acts on those things or not. And that's just not really true. It just feels that way when you're looking at it from a long perspective. But if you look at the details of how things happen, that's not true. So, yeah, this, basically she eventually comes down from her complete denial to beginning to accept it. And then she's told that the lady was captured by Olugbade's forces right after she left. So as we find out later, that makes the emperor sort of suspicious of her. And she has to be really cautious in the way that she responds to his questioning to make it clear she had no idea and that there was no connection to these things. Like there is an indirect connection with her having tried to murder Dio, but luckily the emperor doesn't know about that. So at this point, let's see. Although I still felt loyal to the Emperor, I had begun to doubt his righteousness. Whatever he planned for the lady, I suspected, would look nothing like justice. And she's asking Melu for help. And Melu is like, yeah, about that. That bitch raped me and has kept me imprisoned to her will through an offspring that I didn't want for 20 years almost. So, no, I will not help you. And good, I am excited for her to die because that will free me from this bullshit. And honestly, I cannot be mad at that. Fair, you know. And she's just basically like, we'll save her without you. And Melu is like, all right, go ahead. God, go try. And he says that one council member is here at Bikina House. She plots to free the lady even as we speak, who I'm assuming is Kathleen. And eventually they wind up getting met up with by Kira and Wulin. So, and also there's this moment where she's looking at Bikina House and she's like talking about like, why don't we just go inside? And then realizes that Sanjeet can't see it. She forgot that worked. Because I kept wondering about that. I was sort of like thinking maybe because of the way it's set up, I want it to be visible only to my friends. I was like, well, Sanjeet is a friend and has a vested interest in like keeping her safe. And he's part of the council with her and has this bond. Maybe he will be able to see it because that's like, you know, how the rules are set up. There could be a loophole there. No, he can't see it. So does that mean that he couldn't like go in with them? Would he be walking on thin air if he like climbed the stairs, or would the stairs simply not be there for him? I have to assume it would just not be there. Because if there's like this house that you can feel but not see in like town close enough that you can look out onto the streets, people would have fucking noticed by now. So I'm going to assume it's just like intangible. So yeah, this is, they go to sleep next to the pool, and I do appreciate that Melu like conjures all of these comforts for them, food and blankets and cushions and things. I was like, all right, yeah, thank you. And Wu-In is here, and I will be honest, I did not think this was actually Kira, and I'm a little irritated that Tarasai really immediately believes that it's Kira herself. Girl, we have seen Wu-In traveling with Kathleen, and only traveling with Kathleen every time we've ever seen him. And Kathleen can take the shape of anyone. So if he is with one other person, why would you not immediately assume that's likely Kathleen in the shape of someone else? And who better to impersonate than Kira, who is such a close friend? It makes just total sense to me. And yet it turns out it is actually Kira. I am going to guess that she can sense through the ray immediately that it's genuinely Kira, but still, you know, I had a little bit of a moment there where I was like, you really need to be like a little bit more suspicious, girl. You gotta start getting on your guard a bit more. So Kira, because she's been away from them for 2 weeks, is having the council sickness. And once she is close to Sanjeet and Tarasai, she really begins to feel better, like immediately. Sanjeet and I replied in our minds, coaxing the jaundice of council sickness from her skin. I can't tell you, she whispered, how good that feels. 2 weeks is a pretty long time. Apparently a month, and that's when you'll start to go mad. And I feel like that is just such an unfair reaction for your body to have. I keep coming back to that and just like, that is messed up. But it makes sense, you know, that somebody can't just run off and like go live another life, and that binding them in that way in order to keep the power intact and keep people loyal. I mean, that does make sense. So she tells Tarasai that Dio has forgiven her and wants specifically for her to know that and come back. And Tarasai is kind of like, I genuinely don't know how that's possible. Like, how can he forgive me? What? And Win is in this weird position here where he seems to feel more guilt over his part that he has played in everything than Kathleen does. Kathleen is much more like, ends justify the means. The lady is like where it's at, and we listen to her and do what she says because we believe that she is the one, and I have no qualms about that. Win is much more reserved about it. He is obviously trying to be as loyal as Kathleen seems to genuinely be, but Win is like apparently bothered a little bit by some of the things that aren't being shared with him and some of the things that he is being asked to do. And when they throw the fact that he tried to burn down a palace full of children in his face, he stiffens and gets pale. And because he's pale already, because he also has council sickness apparently, but he tries to be like, well, we took measures to make sure nobody would die except, and Kira says, an innocent boy who had never hurt anyone. And this is the first time that Tarasai finds out that Kira knows about that. So yeah, turns out he has been spying on them all year at the palace roof. And it turns out that the wind power that he has, he doesn't need to be there. He can use the wind to hear them. And he can use it to fly. And he can use it as a painkiller, basically. It's not really healing, strictly speaking, but it reduces the pain. As he puts it, wounds will stabilize with that around. And it's described as like his hallow, but it's not actually a true hallow, according to Kathleen. So, and by the way, Kira punched him in the face, so she's got like some pain in one of her wrists, I think, and her fingers, and he like helps her with the pain, even though it's as a result of her punching him in the face, which I find very fun. So at this point, Kira says, "You're a fool to serve the lady. So what if she promised to free the Redemptors? You don't even know how she plans to do it, and you've served her for years. She doesn't care about innocent Songland children, Wu-In. For Am's sake, she tried to kill Dio, her own nephew." "She cares," Wu-In insisted. "You don't know her." "And you do?" Kira snorted. "Is the lady your lover or something?" And he explains here where his loyalty comes from. "She found me when I was a boy. I had only just escaped the underworld. Everyone else saw a cursed child, but she saw a son. She was a mother to me and a friend. I should not have tried to kill your prince. I was young and desperate, and I'm sorry." And this is one of those moments where I keep forgetting how much time has passed since that happened. So when he says I was young, I was like, were you? Oh, yeah, okay, true. The lady told me it was the only way. And that to free the Redemptors, Olugbade and his line must be vanquished and the lady crowned. And he starts to like break off, and that's when Tarasai's like, yeah, I know. And Kira is like, "Tar, you figured it out." And Tara's like, "What do you mean I figured it out? Wait, did you know already?" And Kira's like, "I mean, yeah, we know, we could tell that you had the ray, like, give me a break." So she has been summoned by Thaddeus to make her first judgment, and that is how that chapter ends. I am going to have to speed it up a little bit here. But this is when we have like the general discussion about how this is all supposed to go down. First of all, we have the Orphan Day ruling explained, to which Sanjeet is like, yeah, that sounds like some bullshit that nobles will like and that does nothing. And Sanjeet says, High General Wagundu wants me to drill with the Emperor's personal guard. I'm to help lead a campaign. Kira cocked her head. Against who? No one's attacked the continent in decades. Against our own people, Sanjeet said grimly. We're to lay siege to any city that fails to comply with the Unity Edict. Yikes. And Kira says, the Emperor summoned me to help Umbali write new chants of prayer. All priests and priestesses are encouraged to adopt a Book of Common Song. Faith traditions no longer separated by clay, well, ember, and wing. And all of a sudden, it's like really coming together for Tarasai. Like, this is not. And she starts to criticize him, but she feels like weird doing it in front of Win, who actively wants to kill him. And starts to sort of defend him. They only want peace. Peace, Win said, is different than silence. That is a good line. Yeah. So here comes Kathleen. And she is also suffering from the council sickness, and the two of them being together is helping both of them. And he says, you're the one who ignored orders, fleeing to the safe house the moment there was trouble. It was standard procedure, she hissed. If the lady is taken, her council returns to Bikina and regroups. That was the plan. Not for us, Wuin said. You and me, we protect the air. Those were the lady's orders, Kat. Protect the air no matter what. And if you hadn't left your post at the keep, we never would have lost track of her. That's interesting. Kathleen is the one that seems the most loyal. And mindlessly so. Despite the fact that she seems very cutting and perceptive, she's not really practicing that kind of like critical thinking. And yet, she isn't willing to follow orders when it comes to her own safety being in question, evidently. Which is, I don't know. I don't know what to think about that, except that if she weren't actually connected to them through the ray, I would expect her to turn traitor. And I guess she still could. There's nothing about the ray that forces you to be loyal, really, when it comes down to it. It just really encourages it via the side effects of not being. But this whole bit here, I'm just sort of interested in, not only because that points to Kathleen being willing to go off book, but also to leave Wu In alone, which I would have thought she'd be unwilling to do. So this is when they head into Bikina House. And actually, right before this is when we have the summation of a belly song from Kira. That's what we blesseds call it back home. The place closest to your soul isn't your heart, it's your stomach. People of the wing believe that when the pelican breathed each soul into being, it wrote two secrets on a burning coal, your greatest good and your best desire. You swallowed the coal before being born, and it burned in your belly. That's why we wail as newborns. Our people have many gifts, but our greatest good is the one we can't contain. Compassion, loyalty, softness, fierceness, the ability to win hearts, or recognize beauty, or weather a storm. It could be anything. And when we use our greatest good for something beyond ourselves, that's our best desire, our purpose. But the coal inside us gradually grows colder. We forget our knowledge of why Am made us, and our frustration at being too small and weak to fulfill it makes us grow old and content and unless we try very, very hard, we never wail our belly song again. And this is like one of those like things that I really feel very lucky, because I feel like with the podcast, I've genuinely found my thing. My whole desire has always been to bring people joy and make people laugh. And not only am I doing that, But I am also actively turning people into socialists, which I think is probably even better, as I have been told by a few people who started off much more conservative before listening to the show. And granted, that does turn some folks off and they wind up never listening again. But not everybody. It sneaks up. And if I can do that and make people like feel more compassion to their fellow human beings and more of a desire to do something because human beings just deserve to be cared for and not because they, quote, earned it due to some arbitrary system, that's it. That's all I need, kids. So this kind of frustrates Tarasai because she feels like she's basically being forced into finding her belly song, or else the whole fucking like empire is going to be thrown into chaos. And so she feels like she's kind of got a gun to her head here, which I really understand. And Kira keeps being like, you have a choice. And she's like, yeah, but one of the choices is like really so bad that it barely feels like there's a choice at all. And Kira says that she has a plan and Dio refused to consider it. The rest of us could split your duties as High Judge, and Sanjeet could leave the 11. Or no, Sanjeet says, you're talking about Tar leaving the 11 and putting her into hiding. But it's just really like, this is the kind of thing that, yeah, it's a possibility and they do need to talk about it because story-wise, it has to be considered. It's just not something that Tarasai is genuinely going to consider. So we go back to Bikina House. And as they head there, she's like, I'm going to go back to the palace with you guys, but you cannot let me anywhere near Dio. Don't do it. Like, I'm just not to be trusted yet. It's not my fault. It's not your fault. It's not his fault, but we can't be taking that kind of risk right now, okay? So she goes into Bikina House and she is only with Wooin and Kathleen because the other two can't see it. And she finds out that her mother lived in the house with her the whole time. And Kathleen doesn't even want Wooin to tell her this. Wooin is like the one who says she has a right to know. And again, their priorities are very different. And it is so devastating, understandably. She's like, she knew what pain it caused me for her to be away. And she was right there the whole time. And they go into her quarters finally, which is like undeniable that this is where she lived. At first, Tarasai doesn't want to go in. And Wooin is like, you've got to face this shit, man. Like, I tried to scrub my maps off my body and cover them up. I had to get through that. And now I just let everybody see them. And it's so much easier. Like, I've just come to terms with it. So she finds, first of all, they show her a carving that her mother could use this like mirror and watch her through the carving. So she had kept an eye on her the entire time and watched all of her progress, but didn't actually come spend time with her because she was so afraid that she would accidentally give her a command. So basically, yes, she loved her child, but valued the usefulness of that child above actually having a relationship with her, and was unwilling to risk her plan in favor of an emotional connection with her child. And it's just understandably, Tarasai is just absolutely wrecked by this. And she's noticing as she's reading this journal about like her mother watching her grow, is that her mother never calls her by her name. And I have to assume that's because her name was chosen by Melu, and maybe that's like the omen of it is something that the lady is trying to ignore. I don't know. So at one point she says something to Wu-in, about why did she anoint you? Council members only represent our realms. Songland isn't part of the empire. The lady had a new kind of empire in mind, said Wu-in, his voice soft with reverence. And she basically is like, we promised her our army in exchange for her stopping all of the sacrificial children being born in Songland. And she's like, I don't get why you think she can do that. Like, and he says, only the Raybearer can unlock the secret. And she knows how to do it, but it says, let's see. She says it's too intuitive for the Rayless to understand. He pressed his lips together as if trying not to let the secret chafe at him. And then he looks at the journal and says, maybe the answer is in there. And they walk away and collect other journals and other papers. And hours pass. And then she goes back to the room. And Wu-in is frozen and pale and looks fucking horrified. And chucks the journal and bails. And it turns out the lady is full of shit and knows that she's full of shit and is just hoping that he will forgive her because at least she's going to make Songland part of the empire. So I may not be able to stop the sacrifice, but I will improve their lives enough that it'll make up for the sacrifice of the children. What better balm for the loss of a child? Besides, if I let the underworld take our children, the empire would never let me rule. What good is a fallen empress to anyone? So that compels me, because it's not her saying, I don't have control over where they're born. It's her saying, maybe I do, but I wouldn't change it, even if I could. Which is somehow worse. Like, if she were lying merely about the fact that she could do it, that would already be so awful. But if she isn't lying and she can, but she doesn't plan on it, that is truly horrific. And the fact that she says, like, I can't let them take our children. Well, you're planning on letting them be part of things, but you're not actually letting them be considered part of the empire, not really. And all because she doesn't believe that people will like accept her as a ruler. Her power, again, it's not that she doesn't give a shit about people, it's that she cares about her power more. Whenever it comes up against her getting what she wants comes first every time. There's no competition at all. And yeah. She made a promise that she had no intention of keeping. So the next chapter starts off with Wu-in just left with Hyung, didn't even say goodbye. Kathleen left too. And I really, really want to know what he's going to do. Because they are still bound by the Ray. So he could kill her. Like, that is part of it. He could betray her to the emperor somehow. I don't see that happening because there's not really anything the emperor could give him. I don't think that he would be satisfied with. And if he killed her, like, I want to know what that does to the Ray. Is the council disbanded, or do they still feel connected and they just don't have the Raybearer to be the center of it all? Yeah, I don't know, but like, and how much does Kathleen side with him? Because Kathleen just doesn't really seem to give as much of a shit about other people. And there's a part of me that feels like she's only in this because she just doesn't like the Empire or the Emperor, but not even because she really gives a shit about the cause that the lady has. Is she going to side with Wu-in after finding out alongside him that the lady was lying about this? Or will she not really be moved enough? I can't decide what she's like. So the next chapter is Tarasai returning to the palace, and she asks for a room as far away from the children's palace as she can get. And understandably, all of the servants are kind of like, yeah, what? And she has to really push for it. And eventually she's taking a bath, and they get interrupted by Mbali coming in. And Mbali says, oh my God, thank God. I needed to talk to you. Thank Am I found you before. Remember the mango tree? And she says, I don't understand. When you first came to the palace, you stole a story from my head. Remember what happened when the boy grew afraid of his tree. He cut it down. He burned the branches. But as long as the tree stays in its pot, as long as the boy believes it will never grow, the boy is happy. And she nods, because she does get it. And then she is summoned to talk to the emperor and has to really couch all of her responses to everything. And I think she pulls it off, mostly because I don't think he is smart enough to see the signs. He thinks he does. Maybe some, but not really. And she eventually gets around to, he asks, why do you think your mother is in prison? Because he just tells her, about this, assuming that she knew, but she says that she didn't, and that's not why she left. And she says, everyone knows that the members of the Prince's Council aren't allowed to see their parents. No one is above the law. I assume that she was arrested because she was trying to trespass. And he says, no one is above the law, which is why you will condemn the lady to death at your first ruling. And she first does well, I thought that is already established what my ruling was going to be about. And then I didn't think that was the punishment for trespassing. And he's like, oh, no, that's not it. She's a traitor. And I let her get away once because I was being really magnanimous, but she's still up to her shit. And that's it. So I'm going to need you to prove that you're loyal enough to turn your back on your family. And she agrees. No one is above the law, I repeated, and curtsied serenely. I look forward to my first ruling. And she leaves his presence and immediately tells the servants who meet her outside, take me to see her. I want to see the lady. And that is the end of part 3. So, stay tuned, everybody, because I am over time. But I'm going to have a lot more to cover next episode. So, hopefully I'll be able to do it justice. I'm really excited. I have no idea what's going to happen. So, I'll be seeing you all again soon. And until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.